Okay, when we are sampling smaller vegetation, herbaceous vegetation, we need to think about sampling techniques that are going to work for what we're trying to get. And there's a few different what we call vegetative attributes that we might be interested in. And they each have sampling methods that are designed to target the attributes and get the best results for that. So when I say attributes, I mean things like frequency, how often something occurs, maybe percent cover, how much of an area is covered by the different plant species, density, like we do with tree species. You can look at production, you can look at structure, you can look at composition. And the technique that we're going to learn today is called a point intercept technique. And what this is really good for is it's really good for determining ground cover and dominant vegetation. It's probably the best technique for learning those two things. So if we just had a prescribed fire here, we might be interested in, all right, how much bare ground is still on the site a year later, 2 years later, maybe just a month later. So the amount of bare ground could be really interesting to us. We also might really be interested in which species are dominating that site after a fire. We know that fire tends to favor those C4 grasses that can really come back strong and end up dominating the site. So our diversity may go down after a fire, and this is something that we can find out through this technique is, do we have one or two species that tend to be dominating the site, and if so, what are they? One of the drawbacks to this technique is that it is hard to pick up the minor species in the plant community that's out here, because it just may not get it just by chance, you may not ever intercept it. So I want to show you kind of the design that we have here. First of all, you're going to want to set up what we call a macro plot. So with a macro plot, you're going to run a tape measure from 0 to 66 feet. Mine's only 25 feet because I left all of our 100-foot tapes at the school. But 0 to 66 feet running north-south, and this is what we call our baseline. And then we want a minimum of 5 transects running perpendicular to our baseline heading east. So I have one laid out here, and that should also be 66 feet. So what we end up doing is sampling a 66-foot by 66-foot square. And if you're in forestry, that's familiar, right? That's 1 chain by 1 chain, or 20 meters by 20 meters. So it gives us a good chance to really sample this area, and then we would do different macro plots across the site to see if we got anything, you know, some different communities showing up within different areas on the site. The idea with the point intercept is that you are literally trying to intercept vegetation with a point, right? So here's my transect, and you need some kind of measuring device. They recommend like a pole that is maybe 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and you need to think about why the diameter of your sampling point matters. If you're using like a pin flag, your chances of hitting the plant go down, right? So you may need to do more samples. If you use a bigger dowel rod or a bigger point, then you're going to make more interceptions, and you might end up overestimating cover on the site. So, and I also should mention that these techniques are developed widely. Like point intercept can be used in range management and wildlife habitat sampling, can be used for any time you're trying to get at these certain attributes, frequency, maybe an amount of bare ground or amount of dominant species. So how often something's occurring, this is a really good technique. But the Firemon model has adapted this sampling technique for fire purposes, and it's very, very similar to what the NRCS would use for rangeland. So the way it works is you take your pin or your pole, and every foot along your transect, you are going to go straight down and record whatever you touch on your way down. So if you just touch one plant species, but you may touch it multiple times, then you're going to record that plant species that you touch, and I'll come back to that in a minute. If I come straight down and I don't touch any plant species and I just hit the ground, then I need to record what substrate I hit when I hit the ground. Okay, to give you a close-up of what this looks like, I want to lower my pin vertical to the ground, like just let gravity carry it down. You don't want to go perpendicular to a slope. If you were on a slope, you just want to go straight down from like using gravity. All right, so as I come down here at the 1 foot mark, and we're going to do this at every foot, I hit this plant right here, which I've kind of pre-identified as crested wheatgrass. And I will also say that when you're first on the site, I think it's really helpful to just walk around and try and do an inventory of plant species that are on the site. Use your phone, use your prior knowledge, your friend, use whatever it takes to try and figure out what these plants are. But if that's crested wheatgrass, then what I would do then is first I'd need to know the code for crested wheatgrass. And I'm going to provide you with this list. This is a list of common plants in our area. Now, it's really for this site that I'm on at Reservoir Ridge in North Fort Collins up against the foothills. So depending on if you try this at home, you may have a whole different list of species. So just kind of a starting point. But anyway, my crested wheatgrass is Agropyron cristatum. And the code then would be AGCR, the first 2 letters of the genus, first 2 letters of the species. So Agropyron cristatum AGCR, what I would do then is record that hit on my data sheet. And here's my data sheet. And you have to fill out which species are common in your area. So what I would do is put AGCR right here. And then we're going to do what we call a dot tally. So this is for transect 1. And a dot tally is like this. It's a way of getting at least 10 hits in a very small space. And there's more if you need it. But if the first species I'd find is 1, and the second hit would be 2, 3, 4, and then you can connect the square 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm trying to do this through my phone, so it's not working out. And then you can cross it 9, 10. Okay, and because of that, I can just count how many squares, and I go, oh, I have 10, 20, 30, 40. So I have a feeling that I'm going to have quite a bit of this. I'm going to put 1 dot here, okay, and then I'm going to keep moving. So because I hit that plant, and that's the only plant I hit, I can stop there. So you can record, if you had more stratification in height of plants on this site, you could maybe end up hitting 3 or 4 plants before you hit the ground. You would record a tally for every plant that you hit. But let's say you hit 8 leaves of crested wheat before you hit the ground, you would just record that as 1 hit for crested wheat. However, we're also interested in what the ground cover is. And because right when I hit at number 1, right, my post is landing in the middle of that bunch. And so I need to look up my codes for ground cover. And Firemon provided some codes here. And what you'll see here is that I have a code for the basal area, you know, hitting the base of a little bunch grass, really, for a grominoid. And if it was the base of a forb, it would be right there. So BAGR would be my code for what I hit when I hit the ground. So I come back to my data sheet, and I left some space because for me it's easier to put like several of the plant species here and then ground cover here, but it doesn't really matter because you shouldn't end up with the same code. So BAGR would be that basal grominoid, and then I gave it my 1 dot tally right there. So I'm done with this first, I am done with this first point on my first transect. Moving on to the second point, we're going to do this at every 1 foot interval along our transect, so 66 feet. So I'm going to lower this again at number 2. And as I get closer here, what you can see is that I actually am going to hit some stray pieces of grass from this nearby bunch, and I don't want to affect that. I don't clear it out, you know, hit nothing. I hit that grass. It was there. So I'm going to count that again. That would be my second tally for crested wheat. But then as I go on down, I'm really on bare soil. So the code for that was BARE. So I can add my tally to crested wheat, and I can add another ground cover and give it 1 tally. All right, moving on to point 3, come back in. It's going to be very similar. I hit crested wheat before I go down, and actually this time, as I try and zoom in here so you can see, I'm going to clear out the grass so that you can see what I'm dealing with. Down here at the ground, I'm not actually hitting bare soil at this point. This is approximately where my pole hit, and I'm actually hitting some litter. And so that has its own code. I'll come back to the list of species codes here, and litter is LITT. So I come over here to my data sheet and I hit put down LITT. Whoops, I got an extra T there, and give it 1 dot. Okay, so that's the gist of it. You're going to go through the whole transect and do that at every point. Do your best to identify which species it is. And if you don't know, you could just put unknown grass, unknown forb, and just go to functional groups or unknown shrub. Because if you think about it, after a prescribed burn, that may be enough information to tell us if we met our management goals with that prescribed burn, is just simply to say, well, we have an increase in forbs on the site after the burn, or we have an increase in just different functional group diversity on the site after the burn. Or maybe our purpose is to create some more wildlife habitat for those early successional species like the bobwhite quail, and we might want more bare ground on the site so they can maneuver through the grass a little bit easier, especially as chicks. And so whatever our management goals are, that's how specific we need to get. If we really are looking at diversity and species composition, then yep, we would want to know our species pretty well. So the site that I'm demonstrating this lab at is Reservoir Ridge, but this is not the area that was burned in the wildfire last fall. This was a prescribed burn in the fall of 2018. And so this vegetation has literally only had 1 growing season. We came out here in the spring of 2019, and it was incredibly hard to do this lab because everything is just a little sprout, no seeds left over from the previous year. I just want to show you a little bit. It's hard on camera to see, but there is a fairly good diversity. We have some western wheat. I've seen some needle and thread. However, we do also have some invasive coming in, so some cheatgrass, some mullein. And as you look across the landscape, you see quite a lot of mullein stalks. Mullein is pretty common to come in after a burn. We do have some yucca. Stepped over a prickly pear not long ago. And it's important to recognize, and partly what this is for, is that there's very little, I mean pretty much no, thatch buildup underneath this dominant vegetation. And so what does the thatch do? Well, that changes your microclimate in the soil. It does keep sunlight from hitting the soil. It can change the temperature of the soil. It can change the nutrient cycling on the soil. When you get too much thatch buildup, you really start to see a decline in species diversity and a decline in that grassland as a wildlife habitat. There's some more crested wheat, a little bit taller, pretty good. So just to kind of look through here and just notice the different shapes, the different colors, the different heights. gives you an idea of the diversity on this site. It also gives you an idea of how quickly these grassland systems respond. Every once in a while, I can find evidence that this site burned, like at the base of this yucca, where you can actually see the old base of the plant that burned, but it's going to recover, and I'll be putting on new growth soon. When you look out here, you do see other plants that survived and resprouted. Okay, in this part of the natural area, it did not receive a prescribed burn. And I want you to notice, as I zoom down closer to the ground, right, the amount of vegetation is a little bit thicker, more previous year's growth. Obviously, you can see the new stuff coming up underneath. And a little bit more thatch. As you kind of finger your way through this, you're not going to hit bare ground very often. You're going to hit this thatch. That's what we mean by this thatch, this buildup of litter on the ground that's just kind of a mat of old grass that's been pushed down. And our grazing species, they really don't like that. They really like being able to access these new shoots that are coming up that are rich in nitrogen and in proteins. On the other side, now we have some differences in soil too, but you don't see hardly any shrub species in the burn area. That may change over the next few years. It may just be that they're not dominant because they haven't resprouted yet, but we have rabbit brush here. And as we come out here more and just see the difference again in the amount of thatch on the landscape. This area was also not part of the burn, and I hope you can see that distinct light yellow color, those wispy seed heads on top of this grass species. This is mostly cheatgrass, and I'm maybe 100 yards from the burn area. This wasn't burned, and it is very much dominated by cheatgrass, which brings up the matter of timing matters. Cheatgrass really does respond well to fire, but if you're going to have any hope at eliminating cheatgrass by using fire, you need to burn the area in late fall before the seeds have a chance to germinate on the winter soil under the winter moisture in the early spring. And you won't get all of the cheatgrass. They store quite a good seed bank in the soil, but it'll at least help knock it back just a bit. But the main thing to keep in mind is that timing matters for your burn according to your objectives. So make sure that your goals and objectives for the burn match the time that you're going to put the burn on the ground.